In today's Leeds news, Gyabi transfer update, Bamford's next move, under 21s lose, Meslier options, and Robbie Evans finally speaks on deadline day. Morning folks, welcome back to the Leeds View for Wednesday, the 3rd of September with your Leeds United news. Apologies for the slight delay in getting this one out. We had it all done and dusted and ready to go. And then Leeds United have finally spoken on what happened on deadline day and the transfer window in a whole. And we'll get to that towards the back end of the video. We'll start off today though and get through this as quick as we can with the Darko Gyabi update. And as we covered yesterday, Darko Gyabi moved from Leeds United to Hull City on deadline day. But at the time, we didn't know the finer details of what was included in that transfer. Was there a fee? Was there a fee down the line? Or was it a free transfer all up? The initial thoughts were that he had in fact moved on a free transfer to Hull City, who are under a current transfer embargo and can't buy players for any fees unless there's some creative accounting done. This morning, some details have finally emerged on the exit of Darko Gyabi from Leeds, and indeed, he has joined Hull City for a free transfer. However, there is an inclusion in the deal that may see Leeds get some money further down the line. According to reports today, Leeds United have agreed a 50% sell-on clause as part of the permanent signing of Darko Gyabi by Hull City, which could see Leeds make some money should it all go very well for Darko at Hull, which is very, very possible. He's a young player, still has plenty of years ahead of him, and did very well last season as part of the Plymouth squad at that level. So if he should move on beyond this contract, Leeds will get 50% of his total transfer fee, which would see Leeds probably at that point make some form of a PSR profit on Darko Gyabi. And again, as I said yesterday, we wish Darko all the very best. But we will move on and talk about Patrick Bamford. And after being released by Leeds last week, it didn't appear that Patrick Bamford had a huge amount of offers sitting on the table. But with the transfer window closing and not every team getting their business done, all of a sudden Patrick Bamford may become a very, very encouraging option for sides. According to reports in Scotland today, Glasgow Celtic have reached out to Patrick Bamford's representatives and are interested in signing the striker, even though they signed Kelechi Iheanacho on the final day of the transfer window. As a free agent, Pat can now pick his next side and take his time with this, and anyone who has missed out on a move for their key targets towards the end of the window may now look at Patrick Bamford as a good option. The Herald in Scotland say that Glasgow Celtic are in fact interested in a move for Patrick Bamford, although there are some concerns around his injury CV, which will likely be the case with most clubs until Pat can prove that he is fit and ready. Bamford will do very well in Scotland, and if Celtic were to sign him, it would give him the opportunity to play in front of a very large crowd every second week and play at a level where he could potentially get one over his previous owners, the 49ers, if there is any animosity towards them on his departure. Bamford will take his time, no doubt, and will likely have offers from the Championship, MLS, as well as the Saudi Pro League, and potentially in Scotland as well. So we'll see what happens there. Moving on, let's talk about the under-21s. And Leeds United under-21s unfortunately fell to a defeat last night in the EFL Trophy, and Scott Gardner's side lost 4-1 to Port Vale in the EFL group stages. Unlike last season, this current Leeds United under-21s is missing the more experienced players like Diego Monteiro that was part of that side last season, and the only experienced player really in this very young team is Johnny House, and the bulk of this side have come up from the under-18s and would still qualify for that side. And they've started their Premier League 2 campaign very, very well, but they've realised in the EFL Trophy that playing against senior men's sides, there is a very big gulf in difference to physicality being the more important one. Josh McDonald scored Leeds' only goal in the 4-1 defeat, but win, lose or draw, these games in this competition specifically will be seen as development opportunities for this Leeds United side, and I have no doubt that they will learn an awful lot from this. And playing in this competition against strong first team players is as good as a lot of these players going out on loan and playing at that level. So, and I will see how they get back on when they go back to their Premier League 2 under 21 campaign. As I say, most of this squad are under 18 level players and are at stretch goals being in the under 21 side. We do have Andy Cousins joining us on the channel this week to talk about the under 21 side, as he's covered them all season for LUTV, and we'll get his opinion on where they are right now and what players we could and should keep an eye on for the next couple of years. But let's move on. And let's talk about Illan Meslier. And Meslier is very much stuck in limbo as it stands at Leeds United. The keeper is third choice for Daniel Farke's side and managed to miss out on a deadline day exit, with Valencia and Lorient said to be interested in him at that point. There is talk of interest in Meslier in Turkey, and at this point the windows all haven't closed around the world, and there are still some options for Meslier and for Leeds. The Belgium transfer window doesn't close until Monday coming, which means he could still make a move there. Turkey and Greece, which could be ideal options for him, they don't close until Friday, September 22nd. The Saudi Pro League window remains open until Tuesday, September 23rd. And the Serbian window, although more unlikely, doesn't close until Wednesday the 17th. There's no doubt that his agent is working very hard to get him a move to a new club and not waste this portion of his career sitting in the stands watching football as a third choice goalkeeper. And Fenerbahce have been linked all summer with a potential move for Ilhan Meslier, and they could still now make a move for him in the remaining weeks of their window, and we'll see what happens there. The other option that has been talked about and mentioned again over the last couple of days is that Meslier could sit out his contract, wait till January, and then negotiate a free transfer away from Leeds to a club in mainland Europe. That could happen, or there could be, even when these windows all close, if he is still here, there could be a mutual termination of the agreement to get him off the books in terms of wages and to allow him to go and negotiate a move as a free transfer. So we'll see how that goes. It's likely to rumble on for a couple of more days at least, and we'll see where we are going into the weekend as these windows all start to one by one close their doors, and we'll see how they get on. Let's move on and talk about Robbie Evans. And Leeds United Managing Director Robbie Evans has finally spoken to the local media after what has been silence from the club since the deadline day window closed. Leeds Managing Director has spoken with Graham Smith in the Yorkshire Evening Post and gave his insight into the transfer window and specifically the deadline day. Evans says that Leeds had a bad deadline day but a good transfer window overall and have maxed out their spending when it comes to PSR. And that fact is still a little bit questionable at this point. Leeds needed a right winger with the end of the window, and Daniel Farke had asked for 2 attackers, and the window closed with Leeds getting none of those in. The first question to Robbie Evans as part of a Q&A with Graham Smith was they didn't get 1 player in, let alone the 2 that Daniel Farke wanted, and what happened. And Robbie Evans had the following to say. It's pretty straightforward in that we had a player targeted and it didn't come true. We thought we had the right price. We put the offer in above that price and the player was on board. Club couldn't get it done. Their club couldn't get it done. We sent the deal sheet in after being given some indications that it could work. But they were also doing 3 deals at once coming in yesterday. So Fulham signed €85 million worth of wingers yesterday, and whether it was out of time or they just decided not to sell, we don't know. But it didn't happen, and thankfully for us, that's why we did all of our overwhelming majority of our business before the last day of the window. So we missed out on that one. We didn't get him. And it's kind of that simple. There's lots of vague language used in that, which you would imagine that they would know, saying that they didn't know whether Fulham just were focused on bringing in players and forgot about Leeds, or whether they didn't want to sell the player. Doesn't appear to add up with the information coming from the Fulham side yesterday, which said that they had told and informed Leeds by deadline day afternoon that the player wasn't for sale, and Leeds had persisted with this, and that's why Fulham didn't put the deal sheet in. And it should be pointed out at this stage that a lot of what has been said will be expectation management as well, and trying to stem the reaction of the fan base after that. But he's then moved on to be asked whether how he felt about the closing of the transfer window, and more importantly how Daniel Farke felt, and Evans said the following. I would say our headline is a bad day at the end of a good window, in that we set out back in May, we had certain targets as far as key positions, key players, estimates of the maximum available spend to get towards, and we checked all of those boxes. So we brought in all the key players, we got them done early, all the key additions for Daniel. We wanted 1 more attacker, we didn't get him, but on balance we executed our plan early and effectively and ended the window, frankly, better than I thought we could have done it back in May. Saying the club only wanted 1 attacker doesn't track with the comments that Daniel Farke made, saying that he wanted 2, or it would be a very difficult season for Leeds this season. And missing out on Igor Paixão and Buenanote also doesn't say that key targets came in. Leeds were also credited having interest in Rodrigo Muniz as the most important part of what they wanted to do this season, making statements after Lucas Mecha signed and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. The club were still very much in the mix for a new striker. That didn't materialise. But on the money being made available for Paixão, Evans had the following to say. Yeah, So unequivocally, we are maxing PSR out this season, this summer. We had spent everything we could. If we had gone onto other targets yesterday or onto higher priced players back in July, the consequences would have seen in the current roster in terms of players that we either could not add beyond the guys that we had got in already. So the players that come in August wouldn't have come in if these deals had been made in July. Or you'd see more key players from last year's promotion side having to go. And for us, there were only a handful of players that were worth even considering making those kind of sales. And when those top players didn't materialise, we held on to the key players that we had. Evans went on to say that the free market doesn't offer Leeds what they need right now, but also saying the players that came in after July, one of them is a backup fullback that Leeds probably could have got away with without at least until January, and maybe brought in one of the more attack-minded targets that Daniel Farke would get to give him the goals he will need this season. Leeds been very solid and having depth at fullback area, but being very, very light on the right-hand side and in a creative number 10 position. So maybe the prioritisation of targets was wrong in this situation. Maybe that's all it is. But on the January window, there are concerning comments that we will have to hear. Evans said that the free market doesn't offer what Leeds are looking for right now. So you can rule that one out at this point. And Leeds are essentially done and dusted with their summer moves. But then moving on to January isn't an option either. Evans said that the club's goal in this window was to avoid having to do any business in January. The last line of avoiding January may be the line that scares fans the most, given that Leeds are still arguably short of more creative players in the final third. 1 goal in 3 Premier League games, and that goal came from a penalty. No goals from open play, although they were much trickier games, and maybe that gets easier when Leeds play teams that are not Newcastle and not Arsenal. But the board are saying this at this point now. They've gotten all of their key targets. They're happy with the business that they've done, and they don't expect any incomings to come into the club in January. And we can sound off in the comments and what you feel about that. Some people think the window's been very good. I think the first half of it, personally, was excellent. It was a very, very strong window. But I do think we fell short at the end to add the more creative, the more exciting and the more influential players in the final third that were needed and will be needed this season. Leeds will now hope that Willie Gnonto can find some really strong form. Dan James can find his form this season and show what he did last year and try and give Leeds the creative flair and power that they need to get and create chances for the strikers this season to try and score some goals. And as we said, as Daniel Farke said, it'll be a difficult season. We'll see if that is the case or if Leeds have gotten all of their business done and the board are correct in their assessment that all the business has been done. Folks, that'll be it for me today. Massive thank you as always for supporting the channel. You can check out last night's live stream above that we spoke to Paul and to Jerry about the window as a whole and tried to take the emotion and steam out of it a little bit as we try to settle down now and look ahead to what has come for Leeds. We've all made our points known on this. It's time to move forward. Folks, that'll be it for me today. Massive thank you as always for supporting the channel. See you soon. Talk to you later.